process of importing these files here and then exporting them into Photoshop. Not really exporting them, but opening in Photoshop. And what we're going to do is just a basic edit on all of these. And this one's a little bright, so I'm going to bring this back down until we can get some separation between the shoulder and the background. And now I can actually do a little bit of white balance. So I click on that, because please click on a darker neutral. There you go, there's your black there, and that neutralizes it. If I want to warm it up, I can do this right here. So I'm just going to speed through this because I feel like most of you already know this. Again, most of these are going to be a visual verification, seeing how they look visually. Alright, that's our basic tone curve HSL detail. Lens correction would be removing chromatic aberration and enabling profile corrections. Everything after that is not necessarily going to be applicable for this particular process. So there are, of course, other places where you would want to do those if that were a finished photograph, but these are just, again, going to be sampled. We're going to take this out of that photograph. So here, and this is, for example, because this is our background, we want to address everything that we see as a potential problem, which there are many. So again, bring this down. Again, you're going to look at this and say, visually, does that look good? And I think we're kind of working in a good spot here. So that is the reason why I'm choosing those settings. Not for any arbitrary setting, but visually, basing it off of what I see. So I'm going to use the guided transformation tool, draw a straight line here, and then another straight line here. And we should be pretty good right there. Guide is drawing a straight line here, straight line here. As you can see in the preview, looks pretty good. We do have some issues here with how that light's coming through the door here, and it's creating a little bit of flare here. So we're going to address these via our either radial gradient or linear gradient or burnt adjustment brush to add some more contrast to these areas. So let's go up here, and I'm going to actually step in and use the radial gradient right here. Pull this down, and notice how the radial gradient affects everything on the outside. So what I want to do is flip it. So if I go into right here, it says invert. It's going to flip this and make the inside darker and the outside not touched. So it's going to go from 0 to 100 going this way. And I'm talking about percentage of effect. So I'm going to expand this out, move this around, and all I did to this one, as you can see here, is it's a little bit darker. And then we have a feathering option here. We can increase it or make it harder edge. And all we're trying to do here is just trying to hide it in there and make it look a little bit better. So we've made it a little darker, and now we're going to make it a little bit warmer. And we kind of created a little bit of a correction for that. So then we're going to do this part over here, and I'm going to use the linear gradient like this. And that will, we're going to use contrast and clarity. Maybe not so dark. A little bit. So now if you look at this before and after, you can see that this is somewhat addressed more, and this looks substantially better here. And so now we can start to bring this into Photoshop. So we're going to right click on this one, and we're going to do edit in Photoshop CC, open as smart objects is going to be a better option. So we do that, and then we got to bring in the other files. That one goes, and we're going to finish editing this one. Alright, now we're going to edit in, open a smart object. Alright, to select this out and create a layer mask, go to select. We can do select subject, and it will do its best to pull this all out, which it does a good job. And then from here we can go to select and mask, and we can either use the transparency, but on white sometimes it's better to use a different view like overlay so we can see the clear differences there. And we're going to go through, and in this case I'm just going to use the brush and make a bigger brush. If you right click on your mouse, you're going to bring up the brush menu, and again we are adding to the selection. That is everything that is not red in this case. Alright, now we need to take away from the selection, so we hit the minus, and it's easier to work in closer, and shrink the brush down. Hold down spacebar to create the hand tool, and then I'm just drawing in the areas that I don't want to be selected. This can be done very loosely because we could always fix it later as a layer mask. Right now we're just trying to get the general stuff selected. There we go. Make a bigger brush. One last spot. Okay. We can do a smart radius, and this will basically treat the edge and find any places that blend it. It'll do it in the best way it can. You could also smooth out the edge and blend it in a little bit better. You could even shift it in if you wanted to. Let's see if it'll do it here. Yeah, you can kind of see it. If you shift it in, it adds more, or you can shift it out and it glows. But we'll leave it right now at about 0. And what we want to do down here is have this output setting set to layer mask. Hit OK. And now it's produced a layer mask for us. And if we ever have this selected here, and we look at our properties, nope, where did they go? Let's put them in there, window, properties, there they are. If this is selected here, now we have selected mask, which allows us to go right back in there, and we can make any changes or edits we want to, but I'm not going to do that right now. So we have this here, and if we try to, for example, select this out, you're going to see that this image, it's going to be gradated on the edge, which is okay, but we want to tighten that up a little bit, so as far as the selection is concerned. But first, let's go ahead and switch to the move tool. We're going to click and grab this, move it up to our background, drop it in place, and so you can see that haloing, so to speak, that we need to get rid of. So we're going to switch that name to background. This is we'll do flying one for this one, or actually upside down. One. All right, and so now in order to get rid of this halo, we're going to hold down Command, click on the layer mask, and you're going to see it's being selected like this. Now we need to go to select, and we're going to do modify and contract. We're going to shrink that selection a little bit. I'm using 3, you can use 2. And what that'll do, and I'll zoom in here so you can see it, hopefully. So it takes it from being this line to this line. Now I'm going to invert it by going to select inverse, and then I am literally going to draw in this line to meet up with this selected line I have here. So I'm going to go to my paint bucket tool, make sure my tolerance is very high, 255, which is the maximum. If I click there once, twice, 3 times, it's going to keep going and biting into that selection and making it a little bit more solid. I hit Command D, it deselects. So now if you look at this layer mask, hold down Option, click it, you can see it's a nice clean line, very usable in terms of blending in with the background. Alright, go back to the move tool. Now I'm going to manipulate these to kind of make them look like they're, you know, this person's doing a handstand here. Scale wise, too big for the whole area. It looks like I'm missing part of the shoe too. So we're going to shrink this down, and I'm just using, by clicking the anchors, I'm going to drag this in, try and get them to the right size, and maybe right a little bit bigger, but right about there. Double click, it sets it in space. I'm going to actually do another one. I'm going to copy this layer, but rather than just doing a straight copy, I'm going to hold down or click on where the name is and then change it to new smart object via copy. If you guys remember, this was specifically so that we can have 2 different raw files here, because each one of these, because they're smart objects, are raw files. So now when I take this one and move it over, it won't affect this original one. It'll be its own individual file. So now I'm going to take this and put this guy up here. I'm going to call it, I'm going to accept that change. Still too big, but I'm going to select that change. Change it to flying one. Alright. And now I'm going to shrink it down to fit it into the proper proportion. So you have to think that's probably like a 2x8. So what I'm going to do is zoom in, and I'm going to go right, maybe a little bit bigger, I'm going to try and put the hands over the top, and I'm trying to bend them over, and not with anything but the layer mask tool. I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. So double click there, and here's the layer mask right here. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to brush tool, and I'm Control Option, click, make a softer brush, bigger brush. I'm going to paint on with the black there, make a smaller brush, slightly harder, and what I'm going to do is just this right here. And I'll zoom in more, make it smaller brush, harder brush, and try and draw that in to almost make it look like the hands are reaching over the top. And that's just using a brush. I'm going to default my colors to white and black, and then add that a little bit like that. Now what's going to complete this is a shadow, so we need to add a shadow underneath this. So I'm going to add a layer, bring it down below it, flying wand shadow, that's what I'm going to call it. And again, you don't want to do all the shadows on one layer, simply because if you make changes to one part of it, you don't want it to affect the entire shadows of this one and that one and the other layers. So now I'm going to go with the brush tool, paint with black, big brush, soft brush. Again, I'm just going to put this underneath, and I'm going to use a layer mask to refine it a little bit more. Alright, so put a layer mask on that, just kind of set it up arbitrarily, meaning with no intent with that, because the intent is going to come with this brush. And I'm going to subtract away with using black here, the softer brush. And the only place really in this area, in this particular layer, that's going to have a shadow, because this is pressed up against it, so you're going to see a shadow here, but everything's free floating. You might see a little bit of a shadow here, but not much. So we're going to zoom right in there. I'm just going to use that feather edge to kind of draw that in. Now we're not going to see the top part of this shadow, but we'll see the bottom part. So I'm going to flip the brushes, draw that back in, zoom in, work close, smaller brush, flip the brushes, big brush, soft edge, alright, no shadows up there, but maybe a little bit of a shadow right here. There we go, and then we can change that shadow fill into soft light and see what that looks like. Looks pretty good there. Yeah, looks like it's holding on to it a little bit. We could even, if we wanted to, let me see here. Let's go into the other side and add a little bit right there. Now go back into the brush here. So this is our layer mask, that's the actual layer. I added more here. I'm going to take it away and the layer mask. And just ever so slightly push that in, just so it gives it a little bit of depth. Maybe even right there, maybe somewhere in there. Alright, cool. So now it looks like we're kind of holding on there. And one of the interesting parts of this one is that we have a highlight right here, but we don't have a highlight like a light source. So I was thinking about making this into the light source. And how I would do that is go back into my background smart object, double click on it, and we can do this in a couple ways, but ideally we're going to do it with the radial. And again, if we draw something like this, it's affecting the outside first, and that's why we want to go down here. It says outside or inside, so I'm going to hit inside, and rather than make it darker, I'm going to make it lighter and more orange. Bring the highlights up and blow it up so it makes the light look like it's turned on. Soften this up so it looks like it's spread all over. I could even just make it a little bit brighter. Like that. Now I can make another one here that's actually meant to be bigger. I'm going to put that back there. So another one, new, and make it bigger. We don't need it to be that bright. But you see how it's kind of looking like this here, so we're going to take this and stretch it out. And remember, the back is like in this area, so I can take it and move it like, and we can drop that down. contrast down a little bit. Hit OK, and what you'll see is this area right here is going to be almost look like it's illuminated right there. So now we can go into this one, the flying one, double click on that, and now we can actually go with an adjustment brush, or even we can use that same radial gradient, and rather than have it so blown out, we could do something like this here, where it just adds a little bit of warmth to the back area, specifically this area. So if I hit OK, you'll see it go from being cool to being almost like it's being acted upon by light, like that. See that? So now we have a reason for this to go this way. We have a light back here, so we gotta maybe change it a little bit. Maybe we can take this layer and this layer, which is my shadow, move it over to block that light a little bit. Now it makes a little bit more sense. How do I create a new layer? Create it upside down. We're gonna just draw on it. And again, big brush, soft, just to lay down the areas what we want with the shadows. General, because we can come back with our layer mask and fix all of that there. So we're going to change this to soft light, and then we're going to add a layer mask to it, and slowly start to whittle away at it to make it look somewhat close to a human shadow, or a human shadow that's upside down, I should say. Again, because there's contact there, we're going to need a little bit darker shadow, so we'll do that in a separate layer. And so we can go in and create a new layer, hand shadow, or handsed shadow. Zoom in. Layer mask, soft light. And then again, we're probably going to have shadow back here, not so much right here because that's where light's coming from. And then maybe not here, but on this side of the fingers, we will. Needless to say, these selections need some work on the fingers, but you get where I'm going with this. So now we've got a little bit more groundedness there. In that shadow there, we can even take this shadow here of upside down one and drop the opacity, kind of make it look a little bit more similar. And we can even add in a brush. So if we go in here to the shadow right here, go to brush, add a little bit up here, and pull some away. That way it kind of has a similar L shape as this. So ideally that's what you want to be able to do, is put items in spaces and then give them some type of weight with the shadows. The special effects in terms of here, creating the light source out of this light is done using the smart objects. And so here we're going to go into this one and I'm going to change the shirt color. There's many different ways to do this, but in this case what I'm going to do is change all of the colors of this shirt, which pretty much land here, and I'm just going to change them to a darker blue, maybe with more saturation and luminance. Hit OK. So you can get quite a bit of special effects done with even just the camera raw.